At dawn, the Colosseum was already awake. Its arches caught the pale light, while dust from yesterday's carnage clung stubbornly to the stone. Vendors shouted for customers with baskets of olives and watered wine. Iron gates rattled as handlers shoved half-starved beasts into place, lions with ribs showing, elephants stamping in protest, panthers clawing at the bars. From the tunnels came the metallic clang of swords being tested not for practice, but for blood. And above it all, a low hum swelled. Tens of thousands of Romans streaming into their seats, eager for the one thing their empire had perfected, death, packaged as spectacle. The Roman arena wasn't just sport. It was a laboratory of cruelty. Emperors staged hunts, executions, and even naval battles, all to remind citizens who held power. Today, we're diving into ancient Rome's most brutal and inhumane arena, the ones that went too far, even for the empire that made suffering into applause. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more journeys into history's darkest and strangest chapters. Now take your seat. The gates creak open, and the show begins. The first gladiatorial combat in Rome didn't begin with emperors in purple robes. It began with a funeral. In the 3rd century before Christ, the sons of Decimus Junius Brutus Scaevola honored their dead father not with statues or prayers, but with blood. They armed 3 pairs of enslaved men and had them fight to the death in the Forum Boarium, a cattle market that smelled of dung and smoke. This was not entertainment, it was obligation. Romans called it munus, a duty owed to the deceased. The ritual had roots even older than Rome. In Campania, warriors were sacrificed at graves to appease spirits of the dead. Over time, killing became combat. The dead no longer demanded random victims but a duel of chosen men. The Roman elite embraced the custom with enthusiasm. To bury a man with wealth showed status. To bury him with bloodshed showed power. But funerals were just the beginning. Leaders soon realized that these games could do more than honor ancestors, they could stabilize politics. Festivals sponsored by magistrates seeking popularity began featuring gladiatorial shows. What had been ritual sacrifice became state-sponsored entertainment. Gladiators weren't just fighters, they were symbols. Early combatants often dressed to resemble Rome's defeated enemies. The Samnite with heavy shield, the Thracian with curved blade, the Gaul with long sword. To watch them fight was to relive Roman victories. Every slash in the sand reminded citizens of the empire's dominance. It wasn't only death, it was propaganda. As crowds grew, so did the venues. Temporary wooden stands gave way to massive stone amphitheaters. And when the Colosseum was finally built in the 1st century after Christ, it became a permanent temple to violence, a monument to Rome's control not only over men, but even over death itself. But the roar of the crowd wasn't always for gladiators. Sometimes it was for creatures dragged from the farthest corners of the known world. Lions from North Africa, leopards from the Caucasus, crocodiles from the Nile, even giraffes carried across deserts. Romans called these spectacles venationes, staged hunts. They weren't about survival. They were about domination. Proof that Rome could capture the wild and destroy it for fun. At the inauguration of the Colosseum, Emperor Titus slaughtered more than 9,000 animals in a single festival. Some beasts were forced to fight each other. Others were weakened by starvation, so hunters could kill them easily. Even elephants, which had once terrified Roman legions, were dragged into the arena and butchered for applause. The scale of slaughter was staggering and devastating. Ancient writers noted how certain species became rare or vanished entirely after decades of Roman games. The Colosseum wasn't just a theater of death, it was an engine of extinction. When we think of gladiators, we imagine evenly matched duels, skilled men, clashing with honor. The truth was often stranger and crueler. Romans engineered mismatches for suspense. Prisoners and criminals were sometimes dressed in comic costumes, armed with wooden swords, and thrown against professionals. The crowd laughed as they died quickly and humiliatingly. Weapons themselves became part of the theater. The retiarius fought with net and trident. His opponent, the secutor, carried a short sword and wore a helmet shaped to deflect the net. It was less a fair fight than a rigged drama. Sometimes, hundreds fought at once in mock battles that turned the arena into a swamp of blood and broken shields. There were even female gladiators, the gladiatrices, used as novelties fighting dwarfs, animals, or each other. Their presence blurred gender roles but reinforced the message: nobody, male or female, was beyond Rome's appetite for spectacle. By midday, after gladiatorial duels ended, the arena shifted to something darker: executions. Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Criminals, rebels, enslaved people, and prisoners of war were forced into roles they never chose. A thief might be torn apart by wolves, an arsonist burned alive, a traitor mauled by lions. Sometimes victims were made to act out myths with bloody endings. A man dressed as Orpheus played music, only to be mauled by a bear. Another, playing Daedalus, was launched on a crude contraption meant to mimic flight and dropped to the beasts below. Some were burned alive wearing the tunica molesta, a shirt soaked in pitch, set aflame until the victim became a human torch. These weren't just punishments, they were public lessons. Every victim in the sand was a warning. This is what happens to those who defy Rome. Rome wasn't content with battles on sand. Sometimes the emperors demanded oceans. The Normachiae staged naval battles were fought in massive basins or even flooded amphitheaters. Prisoners were forced aboard real ships armed with catapults and swords, fighting until the water was red. Emperors also used fire. Victims in burning tunics were cast as Hercules consumed by flame or heroes enduring mythical trials. Death became theater, with smoke and screams as the soundtrack. By controlling both water and fire, emperors presented themselves not only as rulers of men, but as masters of the very elements. Some emperors used the arena as propaganda, others as playgrounds. Caligula once threw spectators into the sand when animals ran short. Nero staged executions as tragic plays, calling it art. Commodus dressed as Hercules and fought in the arena himself, killing animals weakened beforehand, then charging the treasury for his performances. Even emperors praised as good, like Trajan, celebrated victories with months of endless bloodshed. The games revealed the emperor's true nature: cruelty not as accident, but as performance. Not all Romans cheered. Philosophers like Seneca confessed that watching the games made him more cruel, not less. Early Christians condemned the spectacles as demonic, yet the masses demanded them. Bread and circuses, food and games became Rome's political bargain. By the late Empire, the spectacles bankrupted treasuries, drained resources, and dulled civic discipline. When the empire began to collapse, amphitheaters fell silent. The Colosseum stood as a hollow shell, a monument to cruelty disguised as culture. Today, the Colosseum still stands. Its arches weathered, its seats empty, but walk through its tunnels, and you can almost hear the echoes, the clash of iron, the roar of beasts, the cheers of 50,000 voices. It's easy to admire the architecture. Harder, but more honest, is to remember what it was built for. Cruelty rehearsed until it became ordinary. Rome's arenas weren't just about blood. They were about control. By turning death into entertainment, the empire trained its citizens to cheer at suffering and applaud obedience. And that is the lasting lesson. A society that glorifies violence may rise in power, but eventually it crumbles under the weight of its own cruelty. So what do you think? Which spectacle, animal hunts, mythological executions, or emperor's obsessions best reveals the darkest side of Rome's soul? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into the Colosseum's secrets, don't forget to subscribe. It helps us keep uncovering history's strangest and most unsettling stories, and ensures you won't miss the next descent into the past.